Cam Newton's name has always been heavy, a lightning rod in every discussion about quarterbacks, leadership, and what greatness is supposed to look like. From the moment he stepped into the national spotlight, people decided he wasn't just a player. He was a story, a headline, a debate waiting to happen. And the sad truth is, the debates never focused only on his talent, even though that talent was generational. They focused on his smile, his celebrations, his confidence, and the fact that he never asked for permission to be himself. For years, critics like Paul Finebaum have tried to reduce Cam Newton into a caricature: cocky, arrogant, overhyped, undeserving. It's the kind of language that somehow never gets aimed at less talented white quarterbacks who flame out in the NFL without even a fraction of Cam's resume. And yet when Finebaum crossed the line with his latest insult, something shifted. He didn't just critique Cam's game, he questioned his very legacy. He called Cam Newton the worst player Urban Meyer ever coached. Stop for a second and let that settle. Not a mediocre player, not a disappointment. The worst. This wasn't an offhand remark. It was a dagger aimed at the heart of everything Cam has built. And let's be clear, this wasn't just disrespectful. It was absurd. Urban Meyer coached Aaron Hernandez, who was later convicted of murder. Urban Meyer coached players who dealt with arrests, scandals, and cheating. Yet Finebaum wants us to believe that Cam Newton, a Heisman Trophy winner, a national champion, an NFL MVP, was the lowest point of Meyer's coaching career. That's not an analysis. That's not commentary. That's character assassination dressed up as a hot take. It was coded, it was personal, and it was intentional. Because the truth is, Paul Finebaum has a history, a pattern of going after powerful black athletes and coaches in ways that always feel like more than football talk. When Deion Sanders offered his opinion on NIL chaos, calling for a cap to stabilize college sports, Finebaum didn't address the substance of his point. He didn't break down the economics, the fairness, or the long-term implications. He went straight for Deion's throat. He called him a hypocrite. No debate, no nuance, just dismissal. So we have to ask the hard question. Why is it always Cam, always Deion, always Jameis Winston, always Lamar Jackson, but never Nick Saban, never Tim Tebow, never Kirby Smart, never Dabo Swinney? Why are the attacks so personal when the athletes in question are unapologetically black, confident, and unwilling to bow to the traditions that gatekeepers like Finebaum believe they own? This time, though, Cam Newton wasn't silent. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't play the role of the bigger man and let it slide. He fired back. But he didn't fire back with rage. He didn't lower himself to petty insults. He responded with clarity, truth, and receipts. He stood up for himself the way great leaders do, by refusing to let lies take root. And in doing so, Cam revealed something much larger than a media feud. He pulled back the curtain on how narratives are shaped, how media gatekeepers pick and choose whose greatness is amplified and whose legacy is diminished. Because what Finebaum said might have been aimed at Cam, but the ripple effect was about all of us. Cam Newton's story is not just one man's journey through football. It's a mirror held up to the entire system. Think about it. Finebaum wasn't breaking new ground. He was recycling the same old myths about Cam Newton that have been circulating since his Florida days. The lazy narrative, the one that says Cam got kicked out of Florida. It's repeated so often, people believe it without ever checking the facts. But here's the truth. Cam Newton wasn't kicked out of Florida. He wasn't thrown off the team. He wasn't permanently disgraced. He transferred. And he transferred for the most obvious reason in football: Tim Tebow. Tebow was the chosen one, the face of the program, Urban Meyer's golden boy. Cam could have waited forever and he still wouldn't have gotten the reins in Gainesville. So what did he do? He did what thousands of players do every single year. He went somewhere he could play, somewhere he could lead, somewhere he could shine. He didn't cry about it. He didn't drag his coaches through the mud, and he didn't cause public chaos. He bet on himself. He made the toughest decision a young athlete can make, leaving the comfort of the biggest program in the country to carve his own path. And the laptop incident? Let's address it because critics like Finebaum love to use it like a scarlet letter that defines Cam's entire career. Cam never denied it happened, but he was young. He made a mistake. It wasn't why he transferred. It wasn't the end of his career. And it sure as hell shouldn't be the anchor Finebaum and others try to tie around his name forever. Let's be real. If Cam had stayed at Florida, sat quietly behind Tebow, smiled politely, and... What Finebaum underestimated is that Cam Newton's story doesn't belong to him. It doesn't belong to ESPN. It doesn't belong to the critics who have been trying to rewrite history since 2008. Cam Newton's story belongs to Cam Newton, and more importantly, it belongs to the people who watched it unfold, who lived it, who felt the energy when he was on the field changing football in real time. Because legacy isn't a debate, it's a record. It's written in the wins, the touchdowns, the MVP trophies, and the millions of kids who copied Cam's dab in their backyards and on their pee-wee fields. That's the truth Finebaum can't erase. Let's put it plainly. Cam Newton is a Heisman Trophy winner, a national champion, and an NFL MVP. Do you understand how rare that combination is? Do you understand how small the fraternity is of players who have done all three? And yet Finebaum dares to call him the worst? That's not analysis, that's propaganda. And propaganda only works when the people being targeted stay silent. But Cam isn't silent anymore. He's correcting the record point by point, myth by myth. He wasn't kicked out of Florida, he transferred. He didn't ruin Auburn's title shot, he secured it. He didn't fade away in the NFL. He dominated, winning MVP and leading the Carolina Panthers to a Super Bowl. And here's the kicker. Even in his so-called failures, Cam was still extraordinary. Do you realize how many quarterbacks never even sniff a Super Bowl? Yet the narrative around Cam is always twisted. When he smiled, they called him arrogant. When he sulked after losing the Super Bowl, they called him immature. No matter what he did, the criticism never matched the reality. That's what makes Finebaum's comments so dangerous. They aren't just hot takes. They are deliberate attempts to shape the way history remembers Cam Newton. And that's why Cam had to answer back. Because if he didn't, those lies calcify. They get repeated until they sound like fact. But now, every time someone Googles Cam Newton Florida exit, they'll also see Cam himself saying, "I wasn't kicked out, I transferred." But why? Every time someone says he was reckless in the national title game, they'll also see Cam's receipts proving it was a team decision. That's how you reclaim your legacy. That's how you fight back against decades of spin. And Cam isn't just fighting for himself. Whether he knows it or not, he's fighting for every black quarterback who's ever been told to sit down, be quiet, wait their turn, or hide their joy. He's fighting for every Deion Sanders who's called a hypocrite for voicing the same concerns white coaches get praised for. He's fighting for every Lamar Jackson who was told he wasn't a quarterback, for every Jameis Winston who was buried under labels before he had a chance to prove himself. This is bigger than Cam Newton. This is about how sports media polices black athletes who don't conform. Because let's be honest, the unwritten rule is still alive. Black athletes can be great, but they can't act great. They can win, but they better do it quietly. They can dominate, but they better smile politely while doing it. Cam Newton broke that rule the moment he dabbed in the end zone. The moment he walked into press conferences dressed in outfits that screamed individuality. The moment he refused to apologize for being different. That's why he was targeted. That's why Finebaum's voice always seemed loudest whenever Cam's name came up. Because Cam represented freedom, joy, and unapologetic blackness in a sport still run by old traditions and older gatekeepers. But here's what's different in 2025. Athletes don't need those gatekeepers anymore. Cam Newton doesn't need Finebaum to validate him. He doesn't need ESPN to tell his story. He has his own platforms, his own audience, and his own voice. And when he says, "You're lying, Paul," millions hear him instantly. That changes everything. Finebaum can no longer play the role of historian, deciding which athletes get remembered as legends and which get remembered as footnotes. That power is gone, and it's never coming back. Because the truth is, Cam Newton is already cemented. He's in the record books. He's in the highlight reels. He's in the cultural memory of an entire generation. Nothing Finebaum says can erase that. The only thing he can do is expose himself. Every time he tries to rewrite Cam's story, he proves exactly why athletes need to tell their own stories. And that's the beauty of this moment. Cam Newton doesn't just have a legacy, he has a pen. He gets to write the next chapter. And in that chapter, Paul Finebaum isn't the gatekeeper. He's just background noise. Let's talk about impact. Cam Newton changed football, period. He didn't just win games, he redefined what a quarterback could be. He was 6'5", 250 pounds, faster than linebackers, stronger than safeties, and smarter than the coordinators trying to stop him. He forced the NFL to evolve. Before Cam, mobile quarterbacks were still due.